Hello and welcome. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. The Enforcement Directorate on Tuesday said it has attached over a dozen assets in Jammu and Kashmir in a terror financing case against Pakistan-based terrorist and chief of the globally banned Hizbul Mujahideen, Syed Salahuddin. The Central Probe Agency issued a provisional order under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act to attach 13 properties worth 1.22 crore rupees in the state. Meanwhile, Germany, has initiated a move at the European Union to designate Jaish-e-Mohammed chief Masood Azhar as a global terrorist, days after China blocked a bid at the United Nations to ban him. Media reports claim Germany was in touch with several member nations of the European Union for listing Azhar as a terrorist, which will result in his travel ban as well as freezing of his assets in the 28 countries of the bloc. On March 15th, France imposed financial sanctions on Azhar and said it will work with its European partners for putting the JEM chief's name on the EU list of persons and entities involved in the terrorist acts. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze what is being done to deal with the issue of terror funding. Joining me on the program today are Vishnu Prakash, former ambassador, Major General SP Sinha, retired defense expert, Professor Harshvi Pant, Head Strategic Studies Observer Research Foundation. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Ambassador, I'd like to start the program with you. Let's first put into perspective and understand how big a problem is terror funding.
Well, terror funding goes to the root of terrorism because no terror activity can be carried out without funds. And if you choke the terror funding or you starve these elements of funds, their activities will not happen. So, I mean, it basically goes to the heart of it. But the challenge is that the problem is so huge that it would require a sustained effort, a concerted effort, an international effort, especially on the part of the Western nations, because a lot of funds originate from the diaspora of certain countries in the Western countries, and through the Hawala route, through other routes, get into the hands of terrorists. So we have an uphill task. For years, the world has been soft on this issue. There is a consciousness, and now time has come to walk the talk. But we also have a challenge when you have a major country like China, which has decided to be the odd person out. In fact, I would like to wrap up my comment by observing that one of the experts had mentioned to me the other day that China is the only country in the world who treats the Dalai Lama as a terrorist, and Masood Azhar as perhaps a spiritual leader. So that is the kind of challenge we are facing.
Right. General, I'd like to bring you into the picture now. You know, what is the scale and the magnitude of the problem, and how do we deal with this?
It has many dimensions. Firstly, India specific dimension angle and international level. And at India level also, I would like to connect it with Pakistan. You are aware that NIA is carrying out an inquiry with regard to terror funding for Hurriyat leaders to the tune of about 800 crores. The case is already in Delhi High Court. Gilani's own son has admitted the complete terror funding structure. He has gone on to describe that it starts from Dubai, Middle East, Gulf countries, and he explains the complete route, how it reaches Old Delhi, and at times even the Pakistan embassy is involved. So therefore, his own son has admitted how terror funding is taking place. Who else is better evidence than his own son admitting? So therefore, with 800 crores is not a small amount. Another aspect I would like to mention, it's also a fact that Pakistan, a beggar state which is selling its donkeys to raise money, can you imagine the financial mess Pakistan is in? But it has the guts and the courage and audacity to start funding stone pelters. 2,000 to 3,000 rupees are given to a novice, young kids, slightly higher age group bracket, about 5,000, and a professional stone pelter is given 20,000 rupees per day. So that is, and because whether it is tourism industry or a carpet industry or apple industry, everything is in disarray. So therefore, they fall prey for getting some money to be able to survive. They fall prey to terror funding from Pakistan side. So you see if you see the quantum is huge, because as Ambassador Saab was saying that terrorism cannot survive without terror funding. It is sine qua non. It is most essential. It is prerequisite. It is the oxygen which gives life to terror. It is the oxygen. This oxygen needs to be removed, because you've seen the type, I mean, just recently, just see few days back, what has happened in New Zealand, one of the most peaceful countries. This virus is spreading throughout the world. You talk of ISIS, you talk of Al-Qaeda, you talk of Taliban, you talk of all these organizations in Pakistan, more than 47 in number. All these people are just creating terror, and the whole thing is emanating from the sick mind, terrorist mind, and hatred it spreads. And you know, we believe in Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, believe in peace and harmony, we believe in love for all. And here are certain misguided people, sick people, mentally deranged people who only spread violence and terror. So the magnitude of terror funding is huge. Now the question arises, what we can do? We can freeze their assets like the way the France has done.
We'll get to what needs to be done and how we can put a curb on terror funding ahead in the program. But before that, let's try and establish and understand, Professor, how are these terrorist organizations really funded? Where is the money coming from? Isn't there a money trail that we can go back to?
Well, certainly, I think if you do a forensic analysis, you will find that there are clear lines of that you can draw as to where the money is coming from, where it is going, how it is being managed. The problem is that I think our laws are still of an age where it is very difficult to prosecute on those grounds. So I think the challenge now for the international community is to see how these networks of terror organizations that are spread across the world, and we now have evidence to suggest that most of these networks actually draw resources from a single source. So it's not as if we don't know where those sources are, but the problem is, can you have countries coordinate their actions in such a manner that you can actually strangle the sources for these groups? Now, if you look at what as you mentioned in your opening remarks, what France, Germany, and European nations are today saying, they are saying this because they now realize the extent of this problem. See, a few years back it was not the case, and whereas India was tom-tomming it, no one was taking India seriously. But today, if you look at the Western world, it has come under pressure. Look at what has happened in Netherlands just recently, yesterday, I think.
France also has borne the brunt of it over the recent times.
Problems. I think countries like Switzerland and Netherlands, Belgium, they have come under these spate of attacks, even England, where it's very difficult to make a case that only law and order approach can solve this problem. Because unless you find, there are two elements, one is the ideological element and one is the financial element. Unless you choke both of them, it's very difficult to actually make sure that you are not propagating this problem further. And so now the realization in the West that we need to actually coordinate our actions. So when they take a more sympathetic account of Jaish-e-Mohammed or Masood Azhar today, it's a reflection of the fact that they are also reflecting upon their inability in the past to do this. And so there is a growing consensus now that unless you actually coordinate, unless you make sure that all your efforts are pooled together, this problem will continue to metamorphose into something else, and you will have to deal with it one at a time, which I think is not the most optimal outcome that the world is seeking. And so we are now looking at perhaps a unique opportunity. And Ambassador Prakash mentioned, except for one country that continues to see it because of its various reasons in a different way. But by and large, India, for example, has been able to convince the international community to a great extent that this is a problem that needs global coordination. And there has been some extraordinary successes that India has achieved. The fact that you can have so many sponsors of the UNSC resolution against Masood Azhar is a case in point. So I think the more countries realize the extent of the problem, they will come to this conclusion that the scale and the magnitude of this problem requires a global effort. It can't be one country dealing with it at a time.
Right. So that having been said, Ambassador, is the time ripe now to try and, for the world first to decide on a definition of terrorism, because that is something that has been eluding consensus really over the years?
No, very, very much so. It's a pity that India's resolution has been tossed around for 20 years and the world cannot even decide on the definition of terrorism. It speaks volumes of the state of denial that so many countries are in, because you are right. I mean, you first have to be able to understand and to define what this monster is all about. So yes, that is very true. Permit me also to mention one additional bit. When I was posted in Pakistan, I was horrified to find that after the Jummah prayers, Friday prayers, and there are literally tens of thousands of mosques all over Pakistan, tents used to come up with a banner, contribute 10 rupees to kill a Indian. So that is the level to which our neighbor has been going, and I mean, now they have become they've gone a little underground.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Ambassador, but looking at the finances, something that was brought up earlier in the program as well, Pakistan's finances are terrible at this point in time. They probably can't even survive for a month. But where is this money coming from, really?
Well, one is the concept of zakat, because as you know, the believers do give a certain percentage of their salary as in alms. And the believers, now imagine a situation where Pakistan, a country today of about 220 million, when I was there it was about 180, 190 million people, who are going to, religious people, well-meaning people, who go to the mosque to offer prayers, come out, see these banners, and instinctively dip their hand in the pocket and contribute all over the country. So you have that huge corpus. Now, elite Lashkar-e-Taiba has 1,500 offices and 11 seminaries, and is said to be proscribed. And certainly the diaspora contributes, and so you have a funnel, a pipeline of funding that is coming in through various ways and means. And the incidents in 2018, at least 8,500 suspected transactions have been recorded. So actual transactions would be manyfold more. And this is a jump from about 5,500 suspected transactions in 2017 in Pakistan. So this magnitude of this problem is huge, the implications are huge. But to answer your question, it would appear, and I would keep my fingers crossed, that the global community, for reasons that Professor has mentioned, our defense expert has mentioned, that since now the fire has started to burn in the backyards or the front yards of so many countries, which were, they thought that they were above, they were not affected by that. I guess there is more concern, and some work has started, but we are in for the long haul.
Yeah, we are in for the long haul. General, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, 2-3 things. A, how this money is coming into the flow, coming into the system. One is through the means of cash, through hawala. Second is through banking channel, through shell companies, by way of charities, as Ambassador was pointing out. So therefore, these are the things. But most important thing I would like to say, that in armed forces we are taught the decision making or the direction starts from top. The top leadership gives us the direction, we implement the direction. The actions taken till now, taken at the highest level, that is UNSC, is deplorable, is pathetic. We have CCIT, which has not progressed for 17 to 20 years. We have not been able to define what is terrorism. The action of FATF, Financial Action Task Force, is also not adequate. Now, I am surprised that you ask Pakistan to explain what are the tangible steps which concrete steps Pakistan has taken to cut down terrorism. There is no response. There is no concrete proof. There is no clear-cut evidence. So why do you again suspend the decision? Pend the decision. Why? You put him from grey list to blacklist immediately. But we go slow. We give another space to Pakistan. So rogue states like Pakistan, they think that they can get away with murder, they can continue to do what they are doing. That is, this is what the truth is. Third thing you said, how are these terrorists getting money, or are the Pakistan getting money? Saudi Arabia, Islamic countries, these are the sources. They come by way of donations to or charities to madrasa and all that, and they get back into the system. So it's all cash transaction, hawala, legal through shell companies, inadequacy of international organizations. All these factors have combined into giving free space and total freedom to these terrorists to operate in the manner they are operating.
Right. Professor, for terrorism really to be contained or to be dealt with in the immediate neighborhood, how much is China's China's role going to be in all of this? Because let's not also forget that the next presidency of the FATF is going to be with the Chinese. So how is all of that going to impact terrorism here?
Well, it's international politics is riddled with hypocrisies. So it's you really cannot expect anything different from China, at least in the short term. They will continue to espouse a worldview which at least publicly they would denounce terrorism. But
that having been said, what was the meaning of the white paper on 26/11 and all that we saw a couple of days ago? I mean, how does it fit into the scheme of things?
Well, I think one thing that China has realized is that India has been very successful in isolating China on this question. And I think that's something that they are, they care a bit about their international image. So there is a sense that while they have to protect their interests in Pakistan, they also need to send out this message that we are sensitive to concerns about, how we are being labeled as supporters of terrorism. So they are coming out with these white papers. They are coming out, that what a monstrosity 26/11 was and how difficult it was to deal with it. But in reality, as far as India is concerned, which is there, at least in so far as India has been able to test Chinese intentions, they have come out extremely short in terms of their ability to deliver on the ground. And this is also a country, by the way, that is impacted by terrorism, and the brutality by which they have dealt with their Uyghur population is indicative of the mindset that they have. That they don't have any strategy to deal with terrorism. They just put people and lock them up.
13,000, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. And so the enormity of what they are doing is in Xinjiang is huge, and I think it is something that is going to have a blowback. It is already having a blowback when you look at some of the Islamic countries themselves now denouncing and asking China tough questions. But as far as India is concerned, I think we should not expect a change of heart in the short to medium term, because that's where China feels strategically positioned as an actor. They want to when they look at India, they don't want to think of a peer competitor. They want to think of a country that is riddled with the bogey of Pakistan. So keep India contained in South Asia, and the best way to do it is to keep propagating the myth about Pakistan. And now that they have invested so much in Pakistan through China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, with all its troubles, it remains one of their shining jewels in their armory, that we are, look, as part of our Belt and Road Initiative, this is our biggest project. And I don't think they would be willing to concede very much on that point. And so what India does going forward will be important, and I think we have already indicated that we are also likely to boycott the second BRI summit. So in that sense, the larger dynamic of Sino-Indian relationship is also evolving. We expected something out of the Wuhan summit. I think many people in India expected too much, although I think the ambition was, even from the Indian side, was relatively limited.
Sure.
So I think now that we are moving forward with what perhaps we want to do with the Chinese and how we want to engage with them, certain things need to be very categorically clear in our mind, that so far as Pakistan is concerned, it's not going to budge, and therefore the question of terrorism, if you think that China is going to change its tune, I don't think that is likely to happen.
Right. Yes, General, you want to add something?
Yeah, I want to add a few points. China has dual policy when it talks of threat emanating from Muslim community. Internally, it arrests Uyghur Muslims. It has military camps going on, about 13,000, as you said, the number they have arrested. What they say, we want to train them in the spirit of giving them nationalism training. Re-educate them. So that's one. Now when it comes to Masood Azhar, then China is puts the ban on the blockade, banning him.
So why not re-educate Masood Azhar as well?
Very good point.
No, yeah, absolutely. They should do that. On that, on detaining 13,000 Muslims in China, Pakistan does not utter a word. Then China comes out with a statement that 26/11 was the most horrendous attack in the history of the world. What are you trying to say? So every time China is China, there are 5-6 strategies which I know of. One strategy is 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And that is in the art of grabbing land, neighbor's land. They'll go 2 steps forward, create a controversy, take 1 step back. Again, after 6 months, 1 year, take 2 steps forward. So they are back to original 2 steps which they had planned. So all these are the five-finger strategy, media warfare, psychological warfare, legal warfare, all that strategy. China has about 5 types of strategies. So therefore, I personally feel all these are just trying to misguide people or throw them in disarray or throw them in confusion. China's aim is very, very clear that it wants to be the most powerful nation of the world. It sees India as a threat, and therefore India has to be cut to size, and the best monkey it thinks is appropriate for this mischief is Pakistan. So that is the strategy, and that is how I look at China's role. So therefore, let's not get carried away. When President Xi had visited India, and there was so much of bonhomie, people were so enthusiastic. Oh, everything is going to be wonderful. At that time, on many channels, I had said nothing will happen, because the mind is sick. The mind is focused somewhere else. By just shaking hands and smiling, and that too, Chinese leaders smile, you just can't make out is he angry or is he happy with you. You just can't make out. So therefore, I cannot trust China at all. I don't trust Pakistan at all. And we have to be on guard if we have to safeguard our national interest, because these 2 states can never think in positive terms as it comes with regard to India.
All right, we should look out for our own interests is what the general is suggesting in not so simple words. But Ambassador, a lot has been said about this. I would like to hear your thoughts as well as a diplomat.
I would endorse what the General said about the Chinese smile, and it takes me back to the late 50s, where Pandit Nehru, I'm paraphrasing him, talks about his interaction with Mao, and Chairman Mao with a smile said that he does not mind if a few million people die in a nuclear exchange or something to that effect. So that is the kind of outlook that this country had. But coming back to the present, unfortunately, China speaks with a forked tongue, and China also is following the Pakistani definition of a good terrorist and a bad terrorist. Yes, you are right about Chinese self-image. China is a major power and wants to project itself as a responsible member of the Committee of Nations. Now, look at Chinese behavior. It will happily make statements, general statements, whether it is BRICS, whether even the UNSC statement, which was piloted by France. China joined that statement because statements don't cost a thing. The white paper on 26/11 doesn't cost a thing. But that is lip service that you pay to say that, look, we are being a responsible nation. But when it comes to effective action, which has costs, China will pull its punches. And that's where it would go ahead and support Pakistan, because it is not just economic, it is strategic vis-a-vis India. It is strategic vis-a-vis getting an access to the Indian Ocean through Gwadar port, through Hambantota. It is the economic side. And basically, it's a part of their game plan. And I, having served in China, having following this country for a long time, I am convinced that China is an adversary, will remain an adversary, and I do not agree with some people who believe that we are wide-eyed about China. I think that we are very realistic about China. The effort on the part of the Indian leadership, and I'm not just talking of present leadership, but successive leadership, is to engage China to keep the temperatures within control, not to let things spin out of control. But I would assert that we are not at all wide-eyed, we are being realistic. And I would go on to say that, you know, we should kind of wait. We should keep our powder dry and take steps according to our strength, because today there is an asymmetry between the capabilities of India and China. But fortunately, our capabilities are growing and we are on the right track, in my view.
Right. I'll just come to you, General, but before that, Professor, so how do we put an end to this? What's the best way forward, really? How do we deal with this problem of terror funding?
Well, I think India's approach has been quite sensible. India is trying to develop coalitions, because clearly if you believe that, you know, all of the international community is going to come together, as you were discussing, if we can't come to an agreement on the definition, then the modalities of how do you manage terrorism become a problem. So I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. So I think the approach that India seems to have taken is a very sensible one, that you develop coalitions of countries that are like-minded, that are willing to see your point of view, and that are willing to work with you in terms of strangling the sources of these terror financing. The problem is that at times, you know, there will be countries that will be very significant who will not be part of these coalitions, and unless you have them on board, the whole edifice of your structure crumbles. So for example, Middle East was talked about, and Middle East is a big source of a lot of these charities and funders. So what do you do? And I think there also what we have seen in the last few years is a significant outreach to the Middle Eastern countries, bilateral.
Very important.
So you know, whether you're looking at UAE and Saudi Arabia, I think one of the big success stories of this government has been Middle East, West Asia. And so developing these bilateral ties with these countries makes it easier for us to deal with some of the challenges. And we have seen some of the major extraditions happening in the last few years, some of the major discussions moving to a point where India and Saudi Arabia and UAE can actually talk about these problems, which are otherwise hitherto were out of the purview of these negotiations. So I think that is perhaps a very sensible approach to this question, rather than looking at it as a global challenge where globally we can mandate that countries come together.
Right.
Well, that is an aspiration, but aspirations are not often sensible policies.
Absolutely.
Two things.
Very briefly, General,
Yeah,
because I'm out of time, so very briefly, close the show for us with your concluding remarks. Yeah.
Money is oxygen for terrorist activities. So strangulate the source of money, freeze accounts, monitor hawala transactions, we will succeed to a great extent. But most important thing I would like to finish within another 10 seconds is that inadequacy and inefficiency of UNSC. It is a pity that, you know, the legal system, the legal courts work on the basis of rule of majority. If it is a 5 judges bench, if 3 say yes, it is yes, 2 notwithstanding who say no. In ICJ, same system prevails. Why in UNSC you want 100% agreement on any issue by all 5? I'm amazed. I fail to understand this system of functioning, and therefore India should use all its diplomacy to ensure that somehow we should solve this problem, that the rule of majority should decide the course of action of P5.
All right. On that note, then we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it from me. But as I leave, I'd like to wish you a very happy and a colorful Holi.